here are also men. So I certainly don't think of myself as an alpha female, though. Anyway, if you don't mind, I'll be reading my paper because I don't want to miss any of the points that I made. So for me, the book turned interesting on page 22 when the author began to speak about imagined scenarios. And what I liked about what the author said, or what his explanations were, basically of ancient happenings and how he explained them in contemporary sort of relatable terms. And the imagined scenarios were a result of humankind's ability to think in the abstract, to imagine and to realize, or at least attempt to realize these imagined scenarios. These were particularly helpful in order to unite humankind so it could expand beyond the tribal level of an average band of 150 individuals. They had to create imagined communities with shared values and interests. Humankind was able to formulate ideologies that could unite a much larger group of people and somehow forge shared experiences and sensibilities. But in my view, humans are still part of the tribes. Not the old tribes, but new tribes, be they religious tribes of over 1 billion Muslims and Catholics, or a communist tribe of the communist bloc. To date, we have not progressed beyond that rudimentary level of how humans function. We continue to fight over linguistic, religious, or national differences. We continue to function as tribes based on these divisions. Also, one must ask, have we really abandoned our hunter-gatherer propensities entirely? Consider the poaching that takes place around the world because of humankind's unceasing demand for animal flesh and products. We may have changed our methodology and perhaps developed more sophisticated ways of running the tribe, but our tribal instincts continue to surface. Nonetheless, our societies show ostensible signs of progress. The way our societies have progressed may indeed be the result of the cognitive revolution, the agricultural revolution, and the scientific industrial revolution, based on an accumulation of knowledge. How was this massive knowledge acquired? We can trace the roots and development of complex rituals and belief systems built on existing concepts from early hunter-gatherer days. Therefore, advancements in civilization are all cumulative, with baby steps forward built on existing knowledge gained through experimentation, insight, and accident. I see knowledge, or I see the evolution and advancement of civilization as a largely linear movement that built on acquired knowledge, refining and adjusting what it already knew before. Furthermore, humankind's great successes have been the result of its ability to transmit that knowledge to fellow human beings, both contemporaries and generations of future humans. There is yet to be a case where humankind as a whole has unlearned the collective reservoir of knowledge gained over millennia. Certainly, records of gained knowledge have been destroyed at various times in history due to either conquest or just accident. But what has been learned by one generation of humans collectively has somehow managed to survive and managed to become a resource for the creation and honing of even more knowledge, at least since the dawn of history. So I had a few disagreements with the author, and perhaps it's because I didn't understand maybe his line of reasoning well enough. But anyway, these are sort of the points of departure. The author challenges the notion of equality of human beings by stating that there are always natural differences in ability or physical characteristics. But I think what is meant by equality today is not whether there is natural diversity in society. Of course there is natural diversity in society. But what is imperative for all humans to recognize is that in terms of being human, or what it means to have a human essence, we are all indeed completely equal. That means all humans must have equal rights under the law, regardless of race, creed, gender, and status. This principle has been exemplified in the charters of many Western nations, even though in reality many of these principles are more often than not violated. But at least in defining the goals and setting the ideals, it is mostly Western nations who have taken the lead in these matters. We do not see these values executed within the boundaries of Eastern powers such as China, or in the current constitutions of several Islamic nations, where there are hierarchies based on religion. I also disagree with the author's use of the word myth. He uses the word rather loosely. It seems he uses the word interchangeably with the words theory or principle, but one could perhaps forgive the author for this as maybe poetic license. So yes, we have created myths as unifiers, but are these myths even lasting enough? Now we have seen the rise of national breakaway movements. The trend toward unity and disintegration seems more cyclical. Look at the hotspots of international politics today, Catalonia and Kurdistan as the most recent ones. Therefore, there's different forces that exert control over human communities at different times in history. They sometimes unify, and at other times they divide. These myths explode from time to time. The trend is definitely not linear, as the author seems to suggest. Even religion has not been a permanent unifier. Look at East and West Pakistan. Was religion able to unite two completely different peoples forever under the banner of Islam? The myth of a single Islamic nation with a diverse population exploded in 1971. This brings me to the idea of monotheism. Perhaps in Arabia of the 7th century, the idea of monotheism was able to unite the warring tribes of Arabia. Perhaps at that time, the idea of worshipping a single deity was regarded as an intellectual advancement from the animism and polytheism of previous centuries. It was considered a more sophisticated notion, and it served a political purpose, as the warring populations of Arabia would be united under the worship of a single deity. But monotheism itself presents some intellectual challenges and is not necessarily an inherently moral idea. There is nothing inherently moral about worshipping a single deity. In fact, the problem of evil remains perpetually unsolved. And despite what the author says, even the dualism of Zoroastrianism does not solve the problem if Satan is still the product of a single deity's overall design. Therefore, the myths themselves are unstable. Generations of humans have often discarded old myths and religions because their own particular experience, cultural ethos, or particular stage in intellectual development has made them aware of the fallacies inherent in many of these myths. Our modern age has seen an erosion of belief in many traditional world religions. The monotheistic faiths have suffered a serious blow in modern times because of the unique experiences of contemporary generations. It is my firm belief that the digital age and the information it has made available to ordinary humans is in great part responsible for the slow but steady disappearance of belief in the Abrahamic God, common to three world faiths. The digital age has enabled us to see the full scale of the tragedy around us. At the click of a button, we are able to view the devastation caused by hurricanes in an impoverished community in Bangladesh, the misery of a brothel full of underage girls in Mumbai, the poverty and disease-ridden communities of sub-Saharan Africa, the horrendous suffering of animals across the world that are raised merely to be slaughtered and eaten by humans, the devastation and annihilation of community upon community in Syria. All this at once and through a mere click of a button. It has brought into focus the full range of human tragedy and animal suffering, and the suffering is absolutely mind-blowing. It is slowly destroying humankind's confidence collectively in the myth of an omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent deity. How can such a God allow such tragedy? The old arguments about a grand divine design and the ultimate triumph of good over evil are no longer sufficient to many, as the suffering is far too real, immediate, and extreme. So, in my view, a brave new world that is free of such tragedies needs to be forged. Common humanity is what needs to be promoted. And that, to me, is not a myth. What direction is history going to take from now on is still a matter of speculation. The author speaks of the end of sapiens and the start of a new superhuman species that may or may not materialize. What I would like to see emerge is a super moral species of Homo sapiens. What humankind must do is to take immediate measures to preserve the planet and those who inhabit it, human and animal alike. It needs to come up with a utopia and a heaven right here on earth. Allow me to share with you what my utopia would include. It would include the recognition of our common humanity, regardless of race, color, creed, or gender. While relishing our differences, we would also always be mindful of our common humanity and also mindful of the needs of other living creatures who share our planet. It would include a much more equitable distribution of resources among both nations of the world and individual human beings. Human beings will become plant eaters and spare factory and farm-raised animals enormous suffering. We would be able to revive many extinct species and restore the health of our ecosystem. Each individual human will respect the other, ensuring each other's level of contentment, not necessarily happiness that the author speaks about. Humanity will focus not on national interests, but the global well-being of all citizens of the world. And this is my sincere hope that this is how history will evolve from now on. Thank you.